Mr. Chair, this hearing is appropriately titled and truly reflects the threats we are facing. Let's be clear, this is not just about market competition. There is a coordinated campaign by the Chinese government to dominate the global auto industry through massive subsidies, forced technology transfers, and control over critical supply chains. China heavily subsidizes its own car companies so they can sell vehicles for prices American businesses cannot fairly match. That threatens jobs in U.S. factories and weakens our domestic manufacturing base. On top of that, China has forced American companies to give up valuable technology as the price of doing business in their market. That means American innovation has been manipulated to the benefit of foreign competitors and foreign workers. And for states like Ohio, the stakes are very real. We have lived through decades of plant closures, mass layoffs, and chronic disinvestment that hollowed out communities across the state and the Midwest. Families lost good-paying jobs in the auto industry because of lack of skill, or not because of lack of skill or dedication, but because production was shipped overseas or plants were forced to close. Now, after years of hard work and major investment to rebuild America's industrial base, we are seeing real progress, especially toward building a thriving EV industry. And we cannot allow China's unfair and unethical practices to undercut the gains our workers and communities have fought so hard to achieve. At the same time, the U.S. automakers face steep cost disadvantages because Chinese battery firms benefit from state support. And uncertainty around compliance standards, timelines, and definitions risk slowing progress and raising costs for consumers. So, Ms. Dzinski, how can federal agencies provide a stable framework that U.S. companies need to invest and U.S. workers need to compete effectively?
Thank you for the question. You've hit on some very important elements and problems that the supply chain is facing, that the auto sector is facing more generally. I think it comes down to having short-term, mid-term, and long-term strategies that allow us to stay the course so that what we're putting in place in terms of important import restrictions, strategic tariffs on certain parts of the supply chain, subsidies that we might provide to advance new technologies and different types of magnets that don't rely on rare earths. I mean, there's so many examples that we begin to think about it as a coordinated and structured approach. And ultimately, the goal of all of this is economic prosperity through a strong manufacturing base where we own our future. But we need to have that commitment across the entire journey. And right now, I think we have pieces of it, but it's not necessarily coming together in a way that's going to get us to that objective. So there are a lot of pieces across the federal government that need to be further coordinated. We talk about the idea of creating an economic pentagon. We don't really need a pentagon, but a structure where federal agencies are more aligned around how we're using the tools. And where we understand as a country at a more granular detail where the vulnerabilities are. So all of this needs to be put on steroids. We need to do a much better job of planning this out.
Thank you. And there's another serious risk to China's entry into the auto industry: data security. Today's vehicles are not just cars, they're computers on wheels. They collect information about where we go, how we drive, and even what happens inside the vehicle through audio and visual monitoring. When that technology is tied to companies that must answer to the Chinese government, it raises real concerns about privacy, foreign surveillance, and national security. So, Mr. Ludwig, in simple terms, what could a foreign government realistically do with that kind of information?
Thank you for the question, Congresswoman. To be honest, they could do whatever you could imagine they could do. These vehicles do collect a lot of data, especially vehicles that have the more advanced driving assistance systems, and that's data that's recorded while the vehicle is driving down the road, and that data is typically sent back to the manufacturer. And if the manufacturer is in China, certainly there are party members in executive ranks at those companies, and they could do whatever they want with that data.
Thank you so much. And Mr. Parton, you spoke about cellular modules and how our vehicles are already acting as surveillance tools, and in your written testimony, you cited that China is the source for 69% of CIM shipments, which aims to become the global monopoly in the CIM supply. With companies like Quectel and Fibercom metastasizing by establishing partnerships in non-Chinese companies and the unlikelihood that non-Chinese companies could develop their own technology to compete, what safeguards should U.S. put in place, and what impact could that technology have on the workforce in the next 5 to 10 years?
As I said earlier in the testimony, I think in terms of vehicles, you've moved down that track. Although the connected vehicle rule is not yet fully implemented, there's a lead-in time. But that sort of regulation is going to mean that automotive companies, have to avoid the Chinese companies, Quectel, Fibercom, and others, or the metastasizing companies under them. And I think that's, as I said earlier, I think that is a model that needs expanding throughout your industry, not just the automotive industry, but all the other areas of it. If I could just go back on very briefly on the question you asked earlier in terms of the sorts of threats that vehicles can do. I mean, here's a good example. The quality of cameras in vehicles now is sufficient to do facial recognition. LIDAR is mapping out everything. In the UK, there have been bans on Chinese vehicles going within 2 miles of certain military bases. The Chinese, of course, do exactly the same. They ban Tesla vehicles from going anywhere near sensitive. So you can see that these vehicles and the data they're picking up, put together with other data, I mean, let's say you drive a car into, I don't know, Langley, Virginia, and then hoover up all the faces and put names and identities to those faces. That's the sort of threat that is possible.
Thank you. Representative LaHood.